First, we're going to look at the European institutions, then the legal instruments, or also the policy instruments that come from the European Union, from Brussels, and then the procedure that needs to be followed to adapt them. And our little icon here on seeds is the one I'm going to use to illustrate what I talk about from examples from the world of seeds, and more specifically seed marketing laws. I will also talk a bit more orally about other types of laws, and you can always ask questions. I'm very happy to respond, but this will also be more discussed at the next lab 2 weeks from now. So for the institutions, we have 7 of them. The main 3 ones are the European Commission, the Council of the EU, and the European Parliament. They are the ones who have decision power, and they are the ones that we will actually focus on today. You have the European Council, which provides guidance. These are like the prime ministers and presidents of all member states. They meet up normally once a month, and Brussels is buzzing with helicopters on that day, and everything is closed because all the important VIPs are here to discuss politics. You have the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg. So they're composed of judges and also advocate generals, and a lot of other people also working to make sure that the EU law is implemented correctly. And then advisory.
Sorry, Fulya, second. If the English booth is not working, you can go in the original audio. So you can go in the main room. But in the English, I think there is the German interpreter that it's on the English. But for the English speakers, just go on the original audio and you can listen to the main floor. Let's try again, Fulya.
Okay. And then the 2 advisory institutions are the Economic and Social Committee and the Committee of the Regions. I will talk about it a little bit more later, so that's why I'm not pondering too much on those 2 now. So the 3 main ones that we're going to talk about today are the European Commission, the Council of the EU, and the European Parliament. They have nice logos, and you're going to see they essentially represent the buildings, and this is the plenary seating of the European Parliament. So these are the buildings where the institutions seat. So the building here is the Berlaymont at the heart of Brussels in Schuman. And these are the 27 commissioners that we have today, 1 from each country. They're not elected, they're nominated, but they pass through a very stringent test. So from the European Parliament to actually get nominated. And it's for a term, it's the same term as the European Parliament. So they're gonna change in May 2023. So in 6 months from now. Can't believe it. But you also have, so these 27 people change every 4 years, but you also have 32,000 civil servants, much like your ministries, right, that work for them. And they're all divided into what we call director generals. It's quite similar to what you know as ministries in your own countries. And they all are competent for different files. And what does the European Commission do? They can propose new legislation, but they're also the executive organ, which is a bit of a difference, I think, from most national institutions. So they monitor the implementation, but they also have the right of initiative. They're the guardian of the EU treaties, and they represent the EU on the international stage. And so what does that mean for our little friend, the seeds? In terms of seed policy, we don't have just 1 ministry or director general that's competent. We have 4 of them. If you stretch it, you could actually even go further, but these are the 4 main ones. The big one is what is called DG Santé, which is a strange animal in the European bubble. And Santé is competent for everything related to animal and plant health. And this also means they are competent for seed marketing So plant health legislation, everything that relates to pest prevention, plant protection products, so pesticide authorization, GMOs, so everything that relates to risk assessments. The new initiative on new genomic techniques is also with them. And also UPOV, which is the acronym for the Union for the Protection of Plant Varieties. So plant breeders' rights are with DG Santé. DG Agriculture, one of the oldest director generals who has never changed, is competent for the common agricultural policy, for organics, and for genetic resources, although DG Santé goes to the FAO International Treaty on Genetic Resources. So you already see that genetic resources are like the lost child that, you know, there's a custody battle, but no one wants it in a way between the different director generals. And then DG Environment is competent for biodiversity. So they manage the EU biodiversity strategy, but also go to the international negotiations on the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Nagoya Protocol. They also foresee nature protection, so all the Natura sites, and also the soil strategy, microorganisms, etc. DG Grow, that's the former DG Internal Market. They deal with intellectual property, but they actually mainly deal with patents because plant breeders' rights are with DG Santé. Don't try to find logic. This is how it works. And I just wanted to give you an example. So DG Santé's big boss, so this is the one of the 27 commissioners who's probably not going to be represented again in May 2023, is Telia Kyriakides. Normally, the Santé commissioner, people don't know her that much, but I mean, she had to deal with the COVID crisis, so she's been on the news much more than her previous commissioners, and she has a medical background. So she's the big boss at the Berlaymont, but there's also, so all of these civil servants you see here, the organigram, and these are only the main units, so the head of units. In each little box, you have at least 10 people working for, you know? So that's the big, let's say, spider that's DG Santé. Maybe not the best image, but yeah. So it's just to show to you that you have a lot of people working on different topics. This is for the European Commission. So the Council of the EU, again, so the logo represents their beautiful new building that was built in a long, long time. It took a long time to build. They represent actually the Council of Ministers. So you have one minister per country and you have different configurations per topic. I'm going to come to that in the later slides, but there's a rotating presidency. Every 6 months, a country takes on the presidency of the council, and they enact a program. They're the ones who represent the EU. They talk to the press. They also negotiate the texts with the European Parliament and the Commission. You're going to understand this better, hopefully, at the end of this session. But so the presidencies are important because they set the priorities and they're the ones who negotiate the files and make sure they're adopted. And they're the legislative branch, so they make the law. Okay, so it's like your parliament in a way. It's quite interesting in the EU. The members of national executive powers, so your ministries, your governments, become the legislative power at European level. Okay, so they act like, in a way, your parliament, because it's indirect representation of member states' priorities in Brussels. And so they co-decide with the European Parliament, but they have much more power in common foreign policy, okay, compared to the European Parliament. So they have 10, the council has 10 configurations. So this means that you have ministers from different ministries that come from national capitals. So general affairs, you'll have usually the prime minister coming. The foreign affairs will be the foreign affairs ministries, transport, telecommunication, energy will be different, etc., etc. So you will regroup all the ministers at national level that have competence on these issues. There's no hierarchy, they're all at the same level, but there's always some competition between configurations. That's also valid for the European Parliament. And here, agriculture and fisheries actually has quite a good rep. I mean, they're quite powerful, sometimes even more so than the environment, which is completely the opposite of the European Parliament. Okay, they vote by simple majority, qualifying majority, or unanimous vote. But before everything goes to the ministers, obviously they're too busy, so they can't do all the work. You have preparatory bodies that essentially advanced all the dossiers. So those are what we call in Brussels jargon ambassadors. It's permanent representatives in Brussels. So each of your countries has an embassy, which is called a permanent representation here in Brussels, which is an embassy. And they have a team that they send to the council to say, okay, my country wants this, my priority is this, we cannot go like, in that direction, etc. And actually they have a lot of power. So the COREPER, so Committee for Représentation Permanente, this is a historical sign of the power of French in European politics before. So it's the Committee of Permanent Representatives. The first one has much more power. It's the socioeconomic one. It's the one where they vote in majority. In majority. And then COREPER 2 is everything that relates to foreign affairs and diplomacy. That's a much more tense meeting where they need to find unanimity, otherwise they don't act at EU level. And you also have working parties specialized in different topics. There are more than 100 ones. And those are like the more technical people that work at embassies. And for seeds, there is the Environment Council that has competence on biodiversity and climate, but the main competence here is with agri-fish. So common agricultural policy, genetic resources, seed marketing, plant health, new genomic techniques. So remember, the last 4 ones are actually with DG Santé, not with DG Agri at the European Commission level. So the agri-fish has a lot more competence in that than the Environment Council. And usually it has a bit more power. And you also have a working party on genetic resources, which I'll come to at the time when we'll explain procedure. Now let's go to the last institution, not last, but last decisive power institution, the European Parliament. Here, so the logo is the seat of the plenary. This is the Strasbourg seat, but most of the work is done in Brussels. The plenary session where all 705 of them seats are in Strasbourg, but they also have mini plenary sessions in Brussels. And honestly, most of the work is done here in Brussels. It's constituted with direct elections since 1979. The next ones are in May 2023. Please go vote, because the parliament is really leaning in a direction that's not nice to see. So there are 705 members of the European Parliament, and the numbers for each country are attributed according to population, but also historical weight. So Germany has the most MEPs, then France, Italy, and the least ones are Cyprus, Luxembourg, and Malta. Okay, and once they're elected, so normally they should send the person you vote for, but it's like national elections. You don't always get to choose, right? The wonders of representative democracy. But they come up with political groups that are established at European level. So you will have, let's take the Greens, all the Greens from the national Green parties, so from Belgium, France, Germany, Austria, will come together and form a political group, even though they were elected in different countries. Okay, and this is the spectrum. So at the very left, you have GUE, the left, with 39 MEPs at the entire Senegal, so they're not that powerful. Socialists and Democrats, the second largest force, and at the European Parliament with 146 members. The Greens, 73. Their numbers rose a lot at the last elections. Let's see how they keep that up. And then all of the rest is blue. Okay, so you see the direction that the European Parliament is taking. Renew Europe is the new name of the Liberal Democrats. They had to take a new name because Emmanuel Macron from France didn't want to be part of a group that was named Liberals, so they had to call it Renew Europe, and that's where the Emmanuel Macron's party is affiliated with. You have EPP, the Christian Democrats, that's the largest force. Then you have the Conservatives and Reformists, the ID group, very nationalist, right-wing, and non-identified, which is usually even worse than ID, identity, and democracy. Okay, so these last three are usually MEPs that, yeah, you should be a bit afraid of. And what do? So they're the legislative branch. They make the EU law together with the Council of the EU. Okay, so they're the normal, like your national parliament, but they have to work with the second institution, which is the representative of the executive power at national level. What about seeds? So it's quite parallel to the European Council, but to the Council of the EU, but with very different weights. So the main committee for seeds is the Agriculture and Rural Development Committee. You have 48 members, full members, and 48 substitutes. So that, you know, if one full member can't attend a session and can't vote, the substitute comes in their place. They're competent for the common agricultural policy, seeds marketing, plant health, and genetic resources. The chairperson, so it's chaired by one person. It's Norbert Linz, German, EPP, classical. So you have a lot of power of Christian Democrats in the Agri Committee, well, in the entire European Parliament in general, but especially in the Agricultural Committee. But they're like the odd duckling. You know, they're not that powerful within the European Parliament. The committee that's really has much more power is the Environment Committee at European level. They have much more competence, and interestingly, the GMOs and so new genomic techniques is also with them. So compare, you know, 48 members to 88 members, and 48 members are actually deciding the common agriculture policy, which is, you know, the largest budget line of the European Union. And here, the chair is Pascal Canfin with the Renaissance Europe, so the Renew Europe from Emmanuel Macron, but he's the former chair or something of WWF France. He's not bad. Any questions? Please raise your hand. People are saying something's wrong with translation. Is that, Matthias, can you, or are you still here?
Yes, which,
In
yes.
the chat.
No, wait, sorry. No, our soul. It's fine. Everything
Okay.
is fine.
It's so, Italian is okay. Great. Any questions? Was it clear? Please don't hesitate. Raise your hand. Do you know how to raise your hand? Or please take the floor, honestly. Let's do this à la bonne franquette. Yes, please, Sabine. Was that just a test? Yes, Sabine, please.
Okay. It was clear, but I have to admit it was too fast for me. So You say
Okay.
that we receive the documents to read.
Yes.
Do we receive a link of what you spoke so that one can, in time, you might know, write down what is what? Because otherwise, I have to admit, I get lost a little bit.
Okay, great. That's a great thing. We wanted to send the presentations today, but we thought it might also be, a bit too last minute. So for the next time, I'll definitely try to give you the presentations before so that you can take notes on them. But that's also why we have something on Friday so that you can go through the material that we'll send today, and you can really ask questions, and I'm here to answer all of your concerns or things that weren't clear, etc.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks. But point taken, maybe I'll go a bit slower. That's also maybe nicer for the interpreters.
Yes.
I get excited, sorry. Yeah, legal stuff. Yeah, everyone has their thing, I guess. So let's go. The second part that I want to talk to you about are the instruments. So what are the laws, in a way, that are adopted by the three institutions that I presented to you? Come up. You have binding instruments, so which are really law, and I'll also get to non-binding instruments which set political trajectories or ambitions, goals, strategies, etc. For binding instruments, we usually use a pyramid. At the very top of the pyramid, like the big growl that everyone needs to comply with, are the EU treaties that found the European Union. The European Union is an international institution. It's a strange international institution, has different powers than the United Nations, let's say, much more powers. But at the end of the day, it was created by international laws that were signed by the 27 countries that comprise the European Union today. The states have negotiated them. They ratified all of these treaties in their national orders. So that's like any international law. Look, for the climate change, for anything like the Montreal Protocol on ozone, emissions, it's the same principle. They negotiate, they get to a compromise, and then you have to ratify it. It's the same with the founding EU treaties. And with each new treaty, competences were added at the beginning. Most of you might know, hopefully. The EU was not a union, it was just a community for steel and charbon et acier. Steel and coal. Merci. I'm sorry. For coal and steel, which created a common market for the two main things that were important economically. Then it became an economic union, and now they're trying to shift it into a more political union with more and more competencies. And there was no European Parliament either at the time. So, and now the European Parliament is at the same strength as the Council, arguably. Okay, but each time it gives more and more basis for EU action. So it's a very long text, and it sets all the rules that need to be followed to divide the competence between the European Union and the national states, which give out a little bit of their sovereignty to the European Union and say, it's better if we act together on this topic than if we all act alone in our corner. And also, especially, they set all the rules for the internal market, because the European Union is based on the free movement of goods, persons, services, and capital. That's the goal, at least. And the European Commission cannot propose any action if it's not envisaged in the treaties. So in any legal act that will come afterwards, you will always find a reference to the EU treaties. So that's where they take their power from. And you have two main principles. the principle of subsidiarity. The EU cannot act if the member states can deal with the issue more efficiently, or if they want to deal with the issue. Okay, so EU action is subsidiary to the member states. The states give sovereignty, but they say that I give you sovereignty, but only for things that I cannot do myself. Okay, and then the second big principle is proportionality, and that the European Union's action cannot exceed what is necessary to achieve the goal. So they cannot, they have like a line, they have to respect that line, they cannot go right and left. For agriculture, the European Union has really a lot of competences, so it's difficult to, you know, get out of line. But if you're dealing with international politics and foreign policy, especially like negotiating international agreements, it's very easy to get out of line, because at the end of the day, the states still have sovereign rights to represent themselves and will sign international treaties in their name. So that's where you see more tensions. Everything that relates to the internal European market, that's usually calmer, but once you get out in foreign policy, that's where tensions arise much more. Then, based on the founding EU treaties, you have the European Council, the Council of the EU, and the Parliament, which are mandated to enact regulations and directives. These are the two main laws that will come out of the EU, okay? But these are regulations of the Council and Parliament, which act together. A regulation is directly binding throughout the EU as of the date that is written down in the text, in the official journal, and it has what we call in law direct effect, which is a strange thing that was created by European law. It doesn't exist in other international law instruments, that any European citizen can claim the rights that were given to him or her by a regulation, okay? Even if the national law says otherwise, goes against it, the European regulation, so of the Council and the Parliament, will take precedence. Then the European Court of Justice looks into the fact whether the national law is against the regulation or not, but you as a citizen can claim the rights that were given to you by Brussels, even if your national capital says, no, I'm changing this, I'm the new government. They cannot do that. A European directive is a more looser instrument. This is like remnants of a bit of sovereignty that and flexibility that was given to member states. It sets end results to be achieved in every member state. So you have obligations, but it's mostly like a obligation of result, but it doesn't have like very strict and clearly defined obligations. It leaves it up to national governments to decide how to adapt their laws to achieve the goals. And it gives a lot of margin of maneuver to states. And you also have decisions of the Council and Parliament. Decisions are not general laws. You have the same thing in your national legal orders as well. Decisions are addressed to specific institutions and situations. They're directly applicable and binding, but only to them. So for instance, the Council and the Parliament says to the Community Plant Variety Office, which is the EU agency which gives out plant breeders' rights at the European Union. It says, please, Community Plant Variety Office, make sure there's gender equality in your institution, okay? Because there's a specific problem that needs to be addressed at the CPVO. I'm not sure it's true though. So this is very pure speculation, but it will be different than having a directive that says gender equality needs to be maintained in all EU agencies. Okay, so it's a decision is addressed to someone or a specific institution or a situation, and it only concerns that. It's not a general law. And then you have opinions and recommendations. Those are non-binding, just like the strategies that I will come after. Then you have, on the basis of the regulations and directives of the Council and Parliament, you might have other EU legal text. In principle, national laws should implement European law. Okay, so it's the national law that will implement the regulations and directives, but, and more so this is the case, the Commission is empowered to adopt legal acts. So you see how it works a bit strangely. The European Commission has the right of initiative, so they initiate the legal process, then they present a proposal, the Council and the Parliament negotiate, and the Commission can adopt more laws, so it also has some sort of legislative power, and they also monitor the implementation. So this is why the European Commission is usually the beast that is attacked the most by Eurosceptic politicians across the EU, because it is a strange animal, anyway. And so what can the Commission do? They can adopt regulations or directives. It's the same principle as for Council and Parliament. A regulation has direct effect, whether it comes from the Commission or the Council or Parliament, or if it's a directive, it needs to be transposed into national laws. The only thing that if it comes from the Commission, it can only be either a delegated act or an implementing act, okay? A delegated act is that the Council and the Parliament have specifically said, please, Commission, do this, okay? We cannot decide right now on this topic, and we need you to go into the details and further develop